So now we're moving on to physical data gathering. You have worked through technical, you've worked through administrative. So again, there are threats and there are threat agents. They're the same. Nothing's changed between the different presentations. So what sort of safeguards are there for physical? And I wish that was spelled correctly because that's sort of off. I'll have to fix that in the future. So let's say what kind of threats? We've got an example. So surge suppression, a natural gas explosion. We might have, what would help, what are the preventers for a natural gas explosion? So what are your physical mitigation? That does CO2, but they generally don't do natural gas. You can have one though. Well, in this case, we have the hissing, so that was somebody was observant. So actually, physically walking a space is a good way of validating, yes. So that could be called a physical threat mitigation. You have regular tours of your area by security professionals, right? Not us, but I mean physical protection. Line conditioners, smoke detectors, fire exits, fire extinguishers, fences, man traps, card keys, door locks, and security cameras, and locking shredder cans. These are all forms of physical threat mitigation. So you have utilities, power, heat, humidity, natural gas. That turns to be the theme this evening, right? So what do you do? What's the threat? Well, explosion for natural gas, right? That's a threat. And what is our safeguard? Well, we're physically touring a site. Unless you have some form of detection that would tell you. What was it? Yeah, that's what the physical tour is about. Let's say everything looks good, but when you tour the facility, it feels warm. Human beings are actually really good physical detectors of environments. So a human being performing a manual tour on a regular basis is a good thing. So fire, we have a lot of automated detections for fire. That's pretty straightforward. We've had a lot of those for a long time. And safeguards might be for fire that we have fire extinguishers, right? Because they need the right fire extinguisher for the right type of task. And then floods. Well, what kind of floods would we be prepared for? So if you have a business and it's not on a floodplain, are you still at risk for flood? From what? Sprinklers. Your fire suppression system's screwing up. A snowstorm, and you have a flat roof, and the roof gives way, which basically floods your facility. Well, you also have the roof giving way. That's part of it. What if you have snow on your roof and it starts to melt? Well, it's going to find any crack or crevice, or probably could create cracks and crevices in your roof, and then you will have water in places you didn't expect it before. How about a broken pipe? Yeah. How about sewer backup? Yeah, that could do you, right? Sewer backup would work really well to say again. Yeah. Well, I was just looking at a facility, and they said, yeah, we had a leak, and I looked at the carpet and I said, yeah, you cleaned it, and they said, yeah, we cleaned it, but not terribly well. Okay, so they had a stained carpet, so I knew that there was water damage. And water damage is fairly easy to spot. When you think of server rooms, you want to think of water. Water is a definite counteraction to electricity, so humidity is a real important one. So moisture gathering on walls, air conditioners that are not venting correctly are all possibilities. Just because you have a raised floor, does that mean you're safe from water damage? No, that just means you don't see it. But it still might be there. And then there's other natural disasters. We have lightning, earthquake, volcano, landslide, hurricane, tornado. You might have safeguards for all of these. What kind of safeguards might you have for such a large regional natural disaster? You might have a worm site. What else? Backups off-site. How about just a list of all your employees' emails, addresses, phone numbers? Say again? An alert roster. How do you get the people you need in time of disaster. When I worked for the state of Washington, they actually had, I was working for the Administrative Office of the Courts. Now that's not something you call like disaster necessary, right? We're not in a position when you work for the courts of being in life and limb and support of people who are having problems because they don't have water or power or whatever, right? However, there is a caveat when you sign your employment contract that says you can be conscripted by the state of Washington at any time for a natural disaster. So, which means I had to talk to my family and get their approval up front that in the case of a natural disaster, they would have to take care of everything at home and I would have to go to the state because that was part of my employment agreement. Interesting, huh? Yeah, you can't avoid being conscripted by hiding. That ends up in jail later on. So, you have to do what you sign up for. Now, in a way, if you sign up with a company and your job, your role, is to be there in the case of a disaster, and in the case of the state administrative office of the courts, I was in the team that had to go to a SunGuard site and bring up the warm site from the SunGuard site. Which meant I would have to go to potentially, once I was conscripted, whichever case it was, I would have to go to either Renton or I would have to go to Spokane. And they would send transportation and I would go. And that's what I would have to do. And my family would not have very much contact with me while I was gone, and I wouldn't have contact with them. So I had to be upfront about saying, okay, we need to plan for this to happen, and I will not be able to get to you. So safeguards can be in that planning, yes? What do we do in case of disaster? So disaster preparedness, both for you and for your family. How many people have children that live at home with them, but they don't have a second parent? You're just a single parent. Okay, you have to have a plan when you work for a corporation. What if I cannot get there and get you home in the case of a natural disaster? I'll give you an example. We have, let's just say lahar. We have a lahar. Or we have a really bad storm that takes out the Puyallup River Bridge, and you work in Seattle. Can you get home if you live in Tacoma? Maybe, maybe not, depending upon what happens, right? So you might not be able to get home. So you need to have a contingency plan in place so that when you're working someplace else and you're a single parent, that there is gap coverage for you. Someone's going to make sure that your son or daughter or group of people you care for is going to have someplace to be, go, and you know they're going to be there, because you might not have the ability to contact them. In a natural disaster, you can't use a cell phone, but what can you use? Landline. You can use a landline, but that goes to people's cell phones, and nobody has landlines anymore. So, how many people have a POTS line in their house? Very good. So you at least would be able to get a phone call home if the lines were not down. So what's another way? It's actually, yes? Say again? Satellite phone. It's less complex. Okay. Has anyone ever realized that you can send a text when you cannot receive a cell phone call? Has anybody had that happen? No, not through Wi-Fi. I'm talking about your texts work on a completely different configuration of signals and of towers. They work on the lower tower set than the cell phone towers. During an emergency condition, the cell phone tower range for phone calls becomes exclusive for emergency response. However, text does not. Text remains available to all of you. Yeah, it's just voice that becomes singular for emergency response. And anybody, he's worked in wireless communication, so he understands what is available to us. However, if you can get a wired connection and by chance somebody has the access to, say, Facebook, you can communicate with people intermittently during a disaster. Meaning you can say, I am on route 2 here, and post it to Facebook or someplace where they would be able to pick it up. Because they probably won't be able to get email, and they probably won't be able, because you're regional, you have problems regionally with communication. Does that make sense? Okay. So what about employment protection? Isn't that a risk that we need to concern ourselves with? What if what if we hire an employee that's nefarious? That could be detrimental to a company, right? Could give away all your secrets, let someone in there shouldn't be. So those are always bad things. We use proof of identity, background checks, proof of citizenship, military clearance. We have ways of vetting who you are. Some companies run financial records on you to see what your finances look like, to see if you're vulnerable to bribery. Is it legal to require a polygraph test as a condition of hire and retention?
Yeah. If you agree to it.
Very good, if you agree to it. It is actually not a requirement that you go through a polygraph test. However, that doesn't mean that the employer will not trust you after that, just so you know. And polygraph tests do lie, by the way. Perimeter protection. What kind of perimeter protection do we need? Well, we need fencing and doors, and we need locks, vehicle barriers. I've seen some pretty cool bombards. Does everybody know what a bombard is?
No.
Yes or no? Could be a pillar. It can be an enormous planter. When I was in LA, they had enormous planters in front of, I walk past the police station in downtown LA every morning. They have enormous planters. Sometimes it's trees. I mean, there's all sorts of things that they technically put in as bombards. But they're to protect areas from vehicles running up into them. So that's a protection. You could have lighting, standby lighting, interior and exterior sensors, giving people badges so you can recognize who they are, but also you can use it for access cards, biometrics. I think Disney World's biometrics are entertaining. Disney World uses biometrics for all people who buy tickets to Disney World. So when you buy a ticket for Disney World, you get it for a number of days, right? And so let's say I buy a ticket for 7 days. When I first go in, they scan my thumbprint or fingerprint, depends on what you give them, and that's now associated to your little paper card. If somebody else takes your little paper card and tries to use it, it will not let them because they can't use your thumbprint to get in. It's two-level authentication, right? So if you ever see an ad saying, I have 3 days left on my Disney World pass and you can buy it for a little bit of money, don't buy it, it's a scam. Because you cannot use someone else's card, period.
Take the hand.
Take the hand, yes. So biometrics is actually used by Disney World to validate your identity and to make sure that you don't resell accessing cards to Disney World, even though you paid for 7 days or 10 days and you only use 7, those last 3 days are not yours to sell. Interesting, huh? Well, they're not connecting the purchase of the ticket to your name. They're not connecting the biometric thumb to your name, hopefully. I haven't been in their system, so I can't tell you exactly what their database looks like, though it may happen in the future, you never know. But that ties together with the card, and that is an important piece. Also, do you have any right to privacy while you're on Disney property?
Nope.
No, you're on private property. They can take pictures of you, they can use facial recognition, they can search you, they can exclude you and say you can't come on campus. Remember, it's private property. You're just buying access tickets. So, technical safeguards. What safeguards should we put in place to secure a server? What physical safeguards would you put in place to secure a server? Say again?
Fireproof the walls as much as possible.
Fireproof walls. Okay, so maybe stone. What else? Locking cabinet. Doors. So you're going to safeguard the doors probably with biometrics or a card reader. A camera. Now a camera. Does a camera protect? No, a camera just tells you who the nefarious person that walked in was.
Well, a security guard watching the camera.
Potentially could interrupt. Yes.
Chassis intrusion.
Say again?
Motherboard supports it.
Okay.
Chassis.
Chassis. Is that chassis? Chassis intrusion. So that would basically, if you tried to open the case, it'll let you know, or you try to move the motherboard, it would let you know. And that's a good one because you don't want to have hacks that are built into the equipment. What else?
Waterless fire.
Yeah, so halon, waterless fire suppression. Oxygen sensors, yes, that is good. Humidity, the standard ones, the humidity, temperature, condensation, those are all really important sensing pieces of equipment. Yes?
Put it in racks.
Yes, so seismic racks actually can take a building falling on them. So that can be beneficial. And what you're looking to gather is not the old data, because you back that up. This is transactional data, or what's current on that system. What else?
About the wires that are feeding, like the connections to have, like a separate path?
Yes, you can have a separate sub box
Yeah.
for the power that goes to the server room. That's good. So dedicated power. Okay, that's very good. So what would you put in place to prepare for business continuity? Business continuity meaning I have to do business tomorrow even though we have a disaster today. What? Generators. You're going to have a generator on site. One of the interesting failings of some companies is they plan to have a generator on site, but then it will run what? So, yeah, there's fuel problems. How long are you going to run it? The other one is I've had companies where they put all of their servers on backup power but not monitors, so they couldn't see what was going on. They couldn't administer the environment. They put all the servers on but no air conditioning, so they couldn't air condition the room, so they had to shut down all the servers anyway. Most backup power, and phone system, you need to have all the phones and the network, because they're all VoIP phones now, and the phone system on backup power as well. So if you put it all on backup power, you're only going to be able to run for a minimum amount of time. So the idea is it gives most companies what we would call a graceful shutdown, and they shut down business. Now, why is a shutdown of power in the business a good idea during a regional disaster?
Why is it a good idea?
Your power,
Everyone
all
gets
kinds
to
of
come
weird.
out.
Yeah, the spikes coming back in as systems are coming up are really heinous. That can destroy systems. It can destroy your backup power, any kind of power conditioning you have. It can destroy it as it comes back up. One example was we had a storm, I believe late 90s, maybe early 2000s. It was a really bad windstorm. It was a typhoon coming into the Pacific Northwest. I saw it. I said, look, we've got a typhoon. It had a nice eye. We had over continuous 120-mile-an-hour winds in Tacoma, and when that was coming onto Washington State, I was actually in a place where I could see the Commencement Bay. That's where my house was. I was up above Commencement Bay. All these huge ships came into Tacoma's harbor to weather out the storm because they didn't want to be in open water when it happened. So I saw one of these big tanker ships anchored down by the bridge over towards Gig Harbor. And because of the wind, now it was turned sideways, it would have been really bad, but it was turned into the wind, and they had dropped 6 anchors. During the duration of the storm, I saw that ship dragged all the way to downtown Tacoma. And they had their engines on full, and they had their anchors in the water. And they were being dragged towards downtown Tacoma. Yeah, that'll give you an idea that even though you plan may not be enough. And we can get storms like that here. It did really bad. It took down a bunch of trees in North Tacoma. We just had one finally taken down. They cut it up on North 26th Street. But anybody know where North 26th Street is? It's the one that goes up toward Proctor. There used to be a whole bunch of really old trees along that road, and they all came down into North 26th Street, pointing towards Commencement Bay. So physical safeguards to secure your data. Well, having a warm site, regular backups, having live backups of transactional data, having another site, not just a warm site, but actually a true replication of your network or your site, if you have websites, is another good example. How about securing your server room itself? Proximity meters. IDS, IPS, yeah, so you can look for that kind. Well, we're talking more about physical, though. IPS, IDS is digital. Little doors, a man trap, having different layers. Say again?
The intrusion detection system, that idea.
Yeah, but that's, when we say IDS, IPS, we're talking about the digital side of your network, not your physical side of your network. When we're talking about physical side, we're talking about alarm systems and doors and physical stuff. That's not an IPS, IDS.
No, just an IDS, an intrusion detection system.
Yeah, but that's not what we call IDSs. Okay. And no, it's not the same. If you say that, someone in the industry is going to look at you and say, "Where did you go to school?" I don't want that to be the case. Okay. Don't say Tacoma. Screw through the heart. No, I don't want to hear that. No, those are just physical securing of the environment. We don't call them IDSs. Yeah. Physical security. Safeguards, yeah. Okay. So cause of non-residential fires, children playing, smoking, natural occurrences. Where's natural gas in that? Heating, that could be heating. Yeah, cooking, could be any exposure, no. Exposure is when you like lose your roof, lose siding, windows broken, those kinds of things. So I probably should have natural gas on there after tonight, right? Other equipment, yeah, you could have equipment failure. Couldn't equipment failure, was that on that? Other equipment?
Other equipment.
Yeah, you can have equipment failure. Coffee pot. We're always on each other about the coffee pot here at the lab, making sure the coffee pot is off. Very important because we have left it on overnight and really spanked ourselves in the morning for that one. Nothing like saying you were the cause of the fire that took out our building so we can't have class. No, that's not a good thing, yes? There you go. We could buy a more expensive coffee maker that would actually turn itself off, but that's another story entirely, right? Yes. Let's see. You have things that you can do in your environment that can cause problems, even innocuous things. Like you can have an air conditioner that could short circuit. You could have, one time I was plugging in a Christmas tree and the outlet and the wire didn't like one another. I must have had a short in my extension cord, and it blew I had a flashlight, and it blew it right at the wall. And I'm sure a couple of people have done this to their outlets where their outlet gets burnt. That's a bad sign. Too much power going through, too much of a good thing in that case, and can burn your outlet. So it can be something that you didn't expect, like Christmas lights that take down your house. Christmas trees. How many people buy a Christmas tree of real type? Okay, so you're going to buy a tree in the beginning of December, or maybe 2 weeks before Christmas. You're going to take said tree that was probably cut way before you put it in. You put it in water. Maybe you cut the bottom because people have told you to do that. And then you're going to set it up in your house and you're going to string electricity on it.
Great idea.
This is a really phenomenal idea. I stopped doing it years ago because I'm allergic to the pitch on Christmas trees. But it really makes sense to have new Christmas lights and to have a fake tree. I know that you're like, oh, but God, it's a fake tree. Put the real one out front and have the fake one in the house. Okay? I know. Just walk by the one out front and smell it and then go in the house and say, oh, Christmas tree. Yeah. So, you can minimize your risk of things like fire if you minimize what you could be exposed with. Fire-resistant materials are great, but what do they do to human beings when they burn? Kill them. They're very toxic. These carpet tiles and the glue underneath, and this is an older building. We built it in, I think, 2004, 2005. But still, this would be a very toxic place to have on fire. There's concrete in the walls, concrete on the floor, so we have that going for us. But the combustibles here could make us all exceedingly sick, make us pass out, puke, all those fun things, right? So you say, I'm going to build with fire-resistant materials, but you need to remember something that is integral to a CISSP's perspective of security. It's all about the fleshy things. We can put in security protections for anything. We can build in safeguards. We can put in good systems that will back up data, but we can't replace you. So when we think about what we bring into an environment, it has to be acceptable for human beings. And I can tell you from experience that regular house burning is more than enough to make you pass out. Add all this plastic and all this stuff we use for construction now, and you're probably not going to make it very far. You can use non-combustible materials like stone. That's acceptable. Now remember, heavy timbers and wood frames. Look at the times in which all these items take to burn. Now, the reason the fire-resistant takes longer time to burn is because it's fire-resistant and it's off-gassing the stuff that make you all sick. However, Takes minutes for a wood frame house to go up. Hopefully Mr. Smith is on top of it with PSE right now, because my home is a wood frame home. So we're going to use the riot method to decide if physical security has been performed for the environment. So you're going to review documents. So what documents are you going to review? You're going to review the schematics about the environment, the systems that are there, what kind of site is being used for those products, and then you're going to actually inspect. And remember I said about the walking around physically? You actually see more in a physical inspection. That's why I start this course with a physical inspection. You're going to interview key personnel. So let's say you interview key personnel and they say, yes, we have a fire suppression system, and then you get to talking to the janitor. Who thought to interview the janitor? Nobody. But you get to interview the janitor and he says, oh, you know, the alarm would never go off. I come here after hours and they never set the alarm, so it would never go off. Yes, they say they do it, but guess what? You performed an interview and you found out they weren't doing what they said they were doing. So in this case, you're going to increase your knowledge of their safeguards, and then you're going to apply what you know about best practices for securing the environment. Validate what they tell you. Is it secure? Did you have an alarm system? You have a CCTV set up where they can record who's here? Is it on? Who backs it up? Who actually looks at those recordings? Then you're going to inspect, and this is when you're actually going to go and validate what they told you. Like talking to the janitor, and you're interviewing, and he says, "Oh, we never set the alarm." So then you ask, "Well, can I come meet with you and see what you do in the evening as you walk through, and come and visit if they'll let you when no one's around, and see what was left out, who left papers on their desk, who did not put the right stuff in the garbage can into the recycle where it's going to be shredded. They didn't lock the door." They didn't turn off the lights. The coffee maker is on. Okay, someone left a heater on under their desk. These are all against the rules, right? Because they potentially could burn the place down or cause a problem. Observe personnel behavior. So you might want to watch. Now that you've validated with the janitor that they're not locking the door, ask if you can be there for whoever is out last. Who is the last person out of the building? Always the last person locks the door. However, the last person out of the door you find out is someone from finance because they're working really late and they don't know about locking the door. Okay. You're going to test the security controls. This is actually seeing if it's true. So this might be the receptionist goes away during break and no one's at the front desk. That could be your quandary that you need to work past. So when the receptionist is on lunch break, you're going to show up and you're going to see if the person at the desk knows the processes for securing the facility. That make sense? Because in the morning when I come to an organization, I got to show them my ID, I got to prove who I am, I have to have a person that's going to validate me and come get me. They're going to make me a badge that's marked differently than other badges. It says in red that I'm a visitor. That means I'm not supposed to be any place unescorted. And then I have to prove my identity. I don't get to go into places alone. That's good security. Okay. Questions?